So thank you all for coming today. It's a free event, but of course also a fundraiser for our sponsors, Orcas Center and the Historical Museum. Please consider becoming a member of these organizations or volunteering or giving a generous donation to a good cause. The museum has decided to tell the whole history of Orcas Island. Today's presentation is part of our modern history, the dramatic Madrona Point story. Please sign up after the meeting for more information about our Kids in Canoes program. We hope to bring Indigenous education into our schools. Alice Walker said, "Anything we love can be saved." Today, we are here to honor our commitment to finish saving Madrona Point as originally intended. Chapter 1. Here's a glimpse of life on Orcas Island in the 1980s. So the Sounder used to publish a large thing called the San Juan's Beckons, and here's Rosario with a spa, restaurant, and 179 rooms. I was living at Olympic Lodge in Deer Harbor in August of '84, and this is one of our potlucks. In this picture, you can see Turtleback in the back, and in the foreground is Olympic Lodge, a historic house built by Henry Caillou, one of the Native American settlers in Deer Harbor. Frequent dances at Walter Henderson's up at the farm in Deer Harbor. We used to have a little inner island ferry called the Hi-U, which I'd call the Hello-U. This was the crew that remodeled the Orcas Hotel, and the group picture they wanted to commemorate the event. Wasn't my idea, I was just the photographer. Robin Golden and Lois Foster doing their dance at Bilbo's, now Mojitas. Indian Island at low tide in the middle '80s. Roger Perdue's gas station in 1985, where Susan's Orcas Arts is now. The Oddfellows are preparing for the July 4th parade in 1988. Orcas Center, 1 year old in 1987. And here's a comparison of the commercial core of East Sound in 2003 on the left and 1776 on the right. Off by a couple hundred years, but you know. East Sound in the 1980s. This farmhouse up here that you can see across from the community church is where I summertimed in the late 60s and 70s, and is now the Island Market parking lot. Well, you used to be able to go to the medical center, and now you can go to the Lower Tavern. Frank used to drive around in his old Volkswagen van. Beautiful Orcas Island is painted on the side. We used to have an A Street Festival in East Sound in May, and Susan Osborne is singing on the stage. And you can see the sea view, which still had its spider arms on the side. Good old days. Paddling off the North Shore in 1987. Chapter 2, Sacred Beauty, Ancestral Lummi Burials, and 3 white and mixed blood cemeteries from the 1850s to 1890. This is the view west over Madrona Point from Buck Mountain. Madrona berries. You can eat them after a freeze, not that they taste good. The view south from Madrona Point. This is a place on a Madrona tree where a branch has broken off and the bark healed in the pattern that we see. And then the colors around the edge are what I call the dying colors. Madrona trees can be alive and dead at the same time. They die over a period of time, and they often change into interesting colors. Madrona Point in East Sound, circa 1915. So Madrona Point was stolen from the Cemetery Association in 1890 and sold to the Harrisons. Local historian Lynn Roberts wrote a history of the fateful meeting. The Reverend S.R.S. Gray, rector of the new Episcopal Church in East Sound, was a keen businessman, but one who was, in financial matters, absolutely unscrupulous. His great mistake was in not becoming a real estate agent. 3 years earlier, the Reverend had acquired the whole north half of Madrona Point, called his subdivision Village de Haro, and was busy selling off lots. So 2 of the 3 commissioners were gone on that fateful day, and Reverend Gray appointed a couple friends, including Mr. Fry, and they threatened the crowd, if you don't approve our taking the land from the cemetery and selling it to my friends, you're provoking a fight. Here's a map that shows the location of the Madrona Point burial areas before 1890, an old pioneer area, Episcopal, Methodist, and Aboriginal. Lynn Roberts compiled burial information on Madrona Point for the period. Setback number 1. The first setback was the 1890 illegal and immoral theft of the property by Reverend Gray to sell for development. Trustees of the people interned at Madrona Point sued in state court and lost on a technicality, the Wild West. That was the 4th attempt in the 1800s to legally secure the title of the cemetery. East Sound was wetlands, and so the green areas show wetlands, and the brown area is an orchard, and shows what East Sound looked like in '89. Chapter 3, Madrona Point and Templin's docks host steamships. There were not really roads on Orcas, so people traveled by steamer. East Sound Dock, extending from Templin's store, which was located right by where the church is now, with the Madrona Point dock and store at the top left in 1907. The view from Madrona Point back towards East Sound. One of the steamers docking at Madrona Point. The Madrona Inn, which is at the top center, opened in 1913 and grew to have 24 cabins. It closed in 1967. As a child, we used to eat chicken dinners there, and I took this pack of matches as a souvenir, and now it's at the museum, so if you ever need to see a bit of history, there it is. Madrona Inn on Orcas Island. Of course, it's the most beautiful of the San Juans, and it's the charm spot of the charm land, inviting you. The Harrisons were both doctors, and Mrs. Harrison was perhaps the first lady doctor in Washington State. This is the front of the inn before its demolition. One of the cabins on the point. One of the old signs. A beautiful but inaccurate map of the inn and cottages from 1939. Don't navigate by that, please. And here's an aerial view of Madrona Point, Madrona Inn in the 50s. Chapter 4, Norton Clapp's Northwest Building Corporation proposed a dense urban-scale condominium and luxury home site subdivision on Madrona Point in 1982. This is their site plan. Setback number 2. Norton Clapp was the largest landowner on Orcas Island in that era. He owned a large acreage in Deer Harbor and 1,500 acres of Turtleback Mountain in addition to Madrona Point. Since there is no protection for sacred sites in America, just protection for registered archaeological sites, our land use laws did not prevent development there. This is just after the buildings were taken down. So in 1984, I went to Madrona Point to photograph it before its impending demise. With my inner ear, I heard the land speak. I am the spiritual and geographic heart of this island. The proposed development will harm our essential cultural connections to the past and desecrate the burial grounds. Orcas Island without Madrona Point Preserve will have lost its most valuable spiritual, aesthetic, historic, and natural feature. So we'll see it coming up. Thanks. All the buildings came down in 1988 as part of the development process. So one of the first things I did in 1986 was write Norton Clapp and ask for a meeting, which led to success number 1. The very first success was to meet with Norton Clapp in '86 and secure an agreement from him to sell to us for preservation. He said he was going to move forward with the development and that the price would continue to go up, so the sooner we got the funding, the better. So the publicity started. Chapter 5, Madrona Point Art Show. Madrona Point Committee forms, the Lummi are contacted, and our collaboration begins. Orcas Center opened February of 1986, and the first group art show was in April. Over 20 island artists celebrated Madrona Point, and out of that, the Madrona Point Committee formed. I made this handmade book, which was, the idea was like taking a walk around the point. So after forming, we began to meet and talk about what to do, and at this meeting in December of '86, the talk of buying the point, either with help from groups like Trust for Public Lands or from tax levies, was prevalent. We contacted the Lummi, and they spread the word among themselves about Madrona Point being threatened by development. And they immediately rose in opposition to the project. Success number 2. Orcas Islander Spirit Eagle noticed that the Lummi tribe had not been notified by the developers as required by law. She reached out to the Lummi Indian Business Council on November 9, 1986. Spirit Eagle became the Madrona Point Committee liaison with the Lummi. I call these mother madrones. Sometimes when a large old tree dies, you'll have this ring of trees grow up around it. And so the Lummi came out to Madrona Point and did a spiritual ceremony to divine, using cedar shields, to divine the location for where the tree burials may have been. And after that, the developer agrees to search for burial sites. And Gary Wesson and Gene Welch did this resource survey and found that there was no empirical evidence of the presence of human remains. They did note, we should stress, that our studies do not preclude the possibilities that either human remains were at some time deposited in trees or simply left on top of the bedrock. According to the stories I've heard, the Lummi were buried in canoes up in the fir boughs, and then when the settlers came, they took everything. Setback number 3. Northwest Building Corporation agreed to do a survey on the point. They did not find evidence that would have any impact on the proposed development. Even if they had, state law normally allows for bones to be moved and reburied elsewhere. Every year the bark peels because the tree is growing and making room for new bark. Lummi Indian Tribal Testimony. The Salmon County Planning Commission held hearings in 1987 on the proposed development. The Lummi submitted this document where they recommended that Madrona Point be redesignated as a conservancy zone to be utilized as an environmental and cross-cultural education center. And the Planning Commission decided no. That was their recommendation to the council to deny the building permits. Success number 3. After hours of testimony, the commission voted no. It was simply a recommendation reflecting the nature of the site, the testimony of the Lummi, and of many Orcas citizens. I had joined the board of the Friends, and we were following this closely, and Jill Schrupp, the Madrona Point Committee Chair, spoke up requesting funding for acquisition of the point as a preserve and heritage center and providing public access to the water. Besides the dock, we own that little pocket beach, which is next to it. Here's members of the Lummi Cultural Resources Committee on a visit in 1987. And if you remember that photograph, View South, there's a copy of it in the exhibit. Standing there, looking south, if you just walked forward and looked straight down, you would have seen this herring ball right off the tip of Madrona Point. And so by that time, I was getting worried about Madrona Point and went public about that. And the committee is still working to save the point. The Lummi tribe and the Madrona Point committee agreed to work together to promote a common plan, with Jill Schropp and Jim Plaster of the Lummi Natural Resource Committee working together. Kurt Rousseau, representing the tribe, said correspondence with developers indicated a willingness to sell. Setback number 4. The developer's permit application for the 88-unit condo development was approved on November 24, 1987. Take a few more years to get all the permits, but the project was basically found to be in compliance with the county's land use regulations. There's the newspaper article about the plan being okay. Basically, the comprehensive plan we have is a development plan, and at that time, there was no provision for conservation. This is the building permit that was granted to NBC for developing the point. And we're still working on it. Setback number 5. This was a big one. We contacted the Trust for Public Lands to help with preserving Madrona Point in 1986. After a year of negotiations about the purchase price, the deal fell through when the developers wanted more the day we were there to hand them the check. And then in the fall of '87, the Lummi tribe approached Congress to fund acquisition, and that effort was stymied in May of '88 when 2 of our 3 county commissioners wrote Representative Al Swift opposing this. So on the left are articles about Lummi seeking funds, and on the right is a letter from 2 of our 3 commissioners to Al Swift opposing the congressional appropriation. However, that led to success number 4. Because of the opposition by 2 of the 3 county commissioners in '88 to the idea of preservation, the many groups and individuals that were supporting preservation by that time began reaching out to our political leaders. On July 7th, Representative Al Swift wrote this letter demonstrating his support for preservation over the opposition of our commissioners. And then that fall, we elected Bruce Orchid as Orcas Commissioner, which was a vital improvement in our political chances. There were trails, walking trails around the point with these beautiful driftwood benches to sit in. Rick and Jeannie Doty, that ran Orcas Homegrown Market for years, where the co-op is now, got married on Madrona Point in 1986. I joined the board of directors of Friends of the San Juans in January '87. January '88, I was elected president. From '87 to '90, the Friends, along with Lopez Commissioner Tom Cowan, and of course many others, ran a campaign to start the San Juan County Land Bank. This was seen as an essential funding source for purchasing endangered places like Madrona Point. It's raised over $125 million in the last 35 years. Thank you, voters. That, in fact, was one of the major impacts of things like Madrona Point happening, which was happening on every island, was it galvanized us to take action. The question mark in the heart: do we save land for love of what we have or regret for what's been lost? A sunrise and a moonrise. Well, we ended up on the front page of the Seattle Times in August of '88. To quote, "The peaceful breezes of East Sound sing across the waters and through the ancient groves of trees that blanket this lush peninsula on the heart of Orcas Island. But time has run out, and we have to move ahead with our plans to meet permit deadlines," said Wayne Reisenauer, project manager for the Northwest Building Corporation. Then a peace vigil was held in September of '88. Despite rain, up to 50 people turned out for this 36-hour peace vigil. Participants chanted, prayed, folded paper cranes, and hung them on trees at the point. Legend has it that if one makes 1,000 cranes and wishes on each one, the wish will come true. The wishes were for peace and saving of the land from development. All the buildings came down in 1988 as part of the development process. This is where the inn was. Chapter 6. Church Council of Greater Seattle in 1987 apologized to Northwest Indian tribes for past persecution. They agreed to become involved with the effort to preserve Madrona Point and to attract attention region-wide to this worthy cause. This is a copy of their declaration. And they said, "We offer our commitment to support you in the righting of previous wrongs." And so Lummi, Jewel, Praying Wolf James requested that their Native American task force help with Madrona Point. This commitment led to a remarkable event held on February 10, 1989. A prayer vigil was held at Madrona Point.
Talk of developing sacred Indian ground on Orcas Island is bringing an outcry tonight. Indian and religious leaders gathered at the headquarters of the Northwest Building Corporation to protest plans for an Orcas Island housing development. The Indians claim the development is taking place on the site of an ancient burial ground. As the demonstrators gathered in Seattle, Pat Woodard caught up with others on Orcas Island as they marched to the scene of controversy.
Having a development come here would pull the soul out of the island.
One earth, one people, one earth.
For some, the march to Madrona Point was a religious experience.
Our belief is that spiritually this is still the sacred ground and to our people and our ancestral. This is where our ancestors come from.
The Lummi say Madrona Point is an old Indian burial ground. Even many of the non-Indians who live on Orcas say Madrona Point is more than just another piece of property.
This has been the heart, the sacred heart, and the geographical center of Orcas Island. And continues
And the
to be
people
so.
who believe that also believe in the power of prayer. More than 100 of them got together today to put those prayers to work.
Another village that was down there, Lummi Village, and on the left side there was a larger village. And I know the Indian name is Temhuilchen.
Jim Plaster says whenever he visits Madrona Point, he has trouble keeping the tears back.
I thought I was a pretty tough guy, you know. And I don't know why I started to cry. And I could feel vibrations that there was something there.
The Northwest Building Corporation is already staking out the lots for housing at Madrona Point. It says it gave the Indians 2 years to come up with the money to buy the land. But the Lummis say there are some things you can't put a dollar sign on.
It's what would happen if if development went into Arlington Cemetery on President Kennedy's grave site. How would you people feel? How would you react?
Whether Madrona Point was ever an Indian burial ground has been hard to prove one way or the other. What's beyond dispute is that for both sides, this is an important place. But the real question may be whether Madrona Point can be developed and still remain the soul of Orcas Island. Pat Woodard, Como News 4, East Sound.
Sorry about the technical glitch. I included some stills here just in case that happened. And the press afterwards. A drumbeat on Orcas. The Reverend John Magnuson, the Lutheran and co-chair of the Church Council of Greater Seattle, who spoke at the prayer vigil, said of the 82-year-old clap, "In the autumn of his life, may he hear our drums." The drums say no, but scenic Orcas Point faces development. Bill James, a Lummi sub-chief, tried to address the crowd of supporters and ended wiping tears with a hand holding eagle feathers. "I'm really touched," he said. "We are not giving up," said Plaster. "We, the Lummis, plan to approach Northwest Building Corporation in the near future and try to reopen negotiations." Prior to this, the survey stakes had been pulled up for the second time, and when that happened, the developers began refusing to talk to us or sell to us, and it took this publicity to turn that around. And for those of you who enjoy horsey cartoons, some men see things as they are and say, "Wow, I dream of condos that could be sold," and say, "Let her rip." March 5th, 1989. Success number 5. Norton Clapp was well known as a major supporter of the Episcopal Church. After the Native American Task Force became involved, publicity about Madrona Point spread across the state and intensified. The Lummi living here were known as the Eagle Clan. Chapter 7. Due to the combined efforts of the Lummi Indian Business Council, Salmon County Council, Madrona Point Committee, Church Council of Greater Seattle, senators, and House reps, the tide began to turn in favor of preservation. This letter, dated July 10th, 1989, is from Bruce Orchid, our Orcas Island Commissioner, and Larry Kinley, Chair of the tribe, to Brock Adams, Slade Gordon, and Al Swift, requesting language for an appropriation. The county and the Lummi begin negotiating. Things are looking better. The senator is now pondering a plan to preserve Madrona Point. So the opposition came out in public. The concerned citizens of Madrona Point organized, began running full-page ads, and had lawyers involved, pointing up the potential problems with any agreement with the tribe. We do not believe preservation is the issue for which we could support ownership by the county or other agencies in the business of preservation. But there are other serious questions as to whether ownership by an Indian tribe would assure preservation. Jim Youngren, a well-known Orcas resident, long live the kings, the fish hatchery, and a developer, wrote a letter to the Sounder with his opinion. He says the Northwest Building Corporation is willing to sell. The county would be given money for a dock and an acre of land for public access, and that the county and Lummi tribe would achieve a common goal of preservation of Madrona Point. And so the supporters started running our own ads, full-page ads, and answering the concerns of the people in opposition. And this is a set of views from Indian Island with the sea pink in bloom. Chapter 8. The $2.2 million appropriation from Congress is dependent upon a request from the county. Hearings were held to determine the fate of Madrona Point, preservation or development. The signing of an agreement with the Lummi will allow the expenditure of federal funds to purchase the point. If no agreement is signed, the developer will proceed with a plan for 88 housing units. Over 400 letters were written, over 66 citizens testified in person at the hearings. This was the single largest event of its kind in the 20th century on Orcas Island. Larry Kinley, chair of the tribe, spoke. We have no other interest in Madrona Point or in some of the other pieces of property out here, other than how we can show proper respect to the dead from the standpoint of our people. Our interest is strictly from the standpoint of protecting and preserving land. I'm Arthur Boyd, today a member of the Madrona Point Committee. I've listened to, I think it's 36 speakers. 11 of them had questions that were adequately answered by our panel. The other 25 were unqualifiedly for preservation. So go ahead, county commissioners, and make your decision. We trust you to make the right one. Thank you. At the end of 2.5 days, there were 18 speakers against and 48 for preservation. Casey Wood was co-chair of the committee. This is truly a pioneering effort in the area of tribal-county relationships, and it is with great pride that we participate with you in creating new possibilities for the future. Lynn Roberts, the historian who did the research on the burials and the attempts at preservation in the 1800s. I'm here today to encourage the county commissioners to approve the agreement on the basis that Madrona Point is a major sacred, historical, and cultural site. Tony Howard, an artist. I live at Olga. I would like to see you sign it now because it's the right thing to do. It's time we gave something back to the natives, and it's in our own best interest. So at the end of the second day of hearings, a lawyer had set it up to be the last speaker, a lawyer in opposition, and he sowed doubt and fear, and this is after hours of excruciating testimony for and against. Bruce Orchid, our commissioner, had a thought. After that lawyer spoke, he said it's only fair that the Lummi have a chance for a final word today, and he turned to Jim Plaster, who gave this speech, the penultimate moment of the hearings. Ladies and gentlemen, I sit here and listen. I do not want to enter into the controversy of political legal terms. We thought we were negotiating in good faith, whatever was asked about us. We turned it over in our minds, discussed it in committee, came up with a solution, and we agreed, well, whatever was demanded of us. All I want to do is re-echo our stand from day one when we first entered into this, that we wanted preservation of Madrona Point in the natural state and protection of our burial grounds. That is all. So all I can say is, don't worry, be happy. And that's when the song was on the radio, and the response from the audience was the same as what we just heard today. The fear and trepidation melted, and what had seemed impossible suddenly felt inevitable. Here was Jim reaching across the aisle to us. So the testimony favored the agreement. At the end of those 2.5 days of hearings, the commissioners voted unanimously to approve an agreement. It was formalized on December 13th. That is what paved the way for Congress to allocate the $2.2 million so the tribe may purchase the point. When the dust had settled, negotiating lawyer Jim Waldo, who'd been hired by Mr. Hearst, wrote this letter to the editor. He thanks our politicians and others for their support. So about 100 years after the theft, a celebration is held to honor the successful effort to save this sacred land from desecration. The celebration of the transfer of the deed to the tribe was on February 17, 1990 at the Oddfellows Hall on Madrona Point. William Randolph Hearst II is standing behind the drummer with the red t-shirt and the blue cap, kind of in the back middle of the room there. Perhaps Hearst summed up the general mood of the group best when he said, "Let this piece of property be a property of peace." As the celebration came to an end, a young Lummi boy commented, "We should do this every year." This design is taken from the t-shirt given away by William Randolph Hearst at the celebration. It's colorful script. In colorful script, it uses the Lummi name for Madrona Point, Sell, Wease, and Save. You can take my word for it. It's a bit hard to read. So people were curious about Hearst's role with Madrona Point. How did this happen? Here's an excerpt from his letter. My acquaintance with Orcas Island began in September '87 while helping a dear friend move to a cabin she had rented in Olga. During the days we spent together, we picked blackberries, hiked on Mount Constitution, walked along the shoreline, and the quiet beauty of your island wended its gentle way into my heart. So when my friend asked me if I would help preserve the point in its natural state, I was already predisposed to consent. I'll do what I can. At this point, Jim Waldo, the Seattle-Tacoma attorney, was recommended to me as the best person to contact for assistance. And so here is one of the celebrants pulling up the survey stakes now that it's possible to do so, and even better use of survey stakes. So love of the place is the glue that holds us together, isn't it? A poster we made celebrating the success. So, Northwest Building Corporation received the money they wanted for the land. San Juan County got culturally significant land preserved and a dock and an acre of land. Lummi Tribe acquired the deed to Madrona Point, their ancestral burial grounds. And the residents of Orcas Island benefit in this way. Quote, people cannot maintain their spiritual roots and their connections to the past if the physical world they live in does not also sustain these roots. Whether the sacred sites are large or small, whether they are at the center of towns, in neighborhoods, or in the deepest countryside. Establish ordinances which will protect them absolutely so that our roots and the visible surroundings cannot be violated, which the land bank has gone on to do. So there was a yeah, thank you again. A stringer for Life magazine was on Orcas Island from New York City on February 17th, and he got invited to the ceremony at Madrona Point. He'd never seen a Madrona tree before, and so he wrote this wonderful little segment for the Earth Day 1990 Life magazine. However, the aftermath, the human toll, was pretty extreme. It divided the community. Yes, by the end, 2/3 of us were for it, but 1/3 were dead set against it. People lost friends. Lynn Roberts couldn't go to the A1 and have breakfast with some of his friends anymore because of the depth of feeling for and against. So I'll just share some lessons learned with you briefly. The meaning of place, our shared love for sacred land. And this was new to me. Change occurs in the political system in America when we make it safe for politicians to favor that change. There's a thing called the law of thirds, which claims that with a controversial issue, about 1/3 of people are automatically for it, 1/3 usually against, and so our job becomes to persuade the third in the middle to come with us. Commitment and persistence are required. After both initial funding sources for the purchase fell through, luck became possible because we didn't give up. Luck being the Church Council of Greater Seattle and William Hurst appearing and both helping tremendously. And then finally, personal relationships across cultures are key to building trust. Jim Plaster, who gave that speech, worked for John Abbenhouse at Boeing during World War II. John, a member of the Theosophical Society in Indonesia, a longtime Orcas resident, treated Jim with love and respect. That led to Jim's transcendent speech at the hearings that opened hearts and minds. Jim told me that story years later when I asked him, how did you connect with the audience that day? So now we're going to take a brief look at the Lummi vision for Madrona Point. It is this inspiring dream of healing our broken native-white relations through cross-cultural education that brings us here today. It's time to act on this worthy goal. So their vision remained consistent through all the years we worked together. The very first document was in '87. It was the first time to mention a trail system, a learning center, history exhibit, need for housing, a foundation, other elements. It said, we share an appreciation for Madrona Point with non-Indians, including many of the current and former residents of Orcas Island. They, too, wish to keep the point in a natural state and to protect its fragile beauty, its unique history, and its sacred meaning to the Lummi people. It is a vision shared by people of different cultures in the interests of both our peoples. So they now have a title for it, the Lummi Heritage and Cross-Cultural Education Center, with a purpose and a program. Originally, the Madrona Inn was conceived as the site for the center. It was demolished, and the doctor's house, which is over by Crescent Beach, was originally part of the preservation effort and was then seen to be a possible location, but it got split off at the end and was sold to a private party. Madrona blossoms. A shooting star on the Crescent Beach side. So now we come to the agreement between the Lummi tribe and San Juan County that was finally adopted in December of '89. It allows for the possibility of a cultural center and a caretaker's cabin on Madrona Point. It also calls for access to Madrona Point with permission and property management. It says to manage the property as an open space, natural area, and forest, open to individuals and groups for walking and educational purposes, with the permission of the tribe, all consistent with protection of the natural resources. And from the start, the Lummis proposed creating a foundation with Lummi and Orcas trustees to raise money for management and ensure that the agreement would be implemented. The trustees were appointed and the agreement written and signed, but the last step to make it official with the state never happened. A similar form of governance is still needed to protect our ancestors and the land. Here's a close-up of the agreement. Chapter 10. The Madrona Point Committee and the LIBC began working together to caretake the point in 1990. This is some of the correspondence. Arthur Boyd, who was a trustee of the foundation, became the lead in this. And here is the original sign welcoming people from 1993 to 2007. Success number 7. In the early years, cooperation between the Lummi and volunteers on Orcas worked pretty well. Orcas resident, former diplomat with the State Department, Arthur Boyd, one of the trustees appointed to the Madrona Point Foundation, acted as liaison. And they wrote their management plan, finalized in '93, when the chair of the tribe wrote a letter to Arthur Boyd saying it would be adopted soon. It included a site plan with 4 categories of use permitted on Selwyn to include passive outdoor recreation, cultural and ceremonial, educational, and environmental enhancement. This is the letter from Henry Kagi saying we're just about to finalize this at Lummi and come work with the council, and he was voted out of office a few months later. Here's Arthur Boyd writing the Lummi saying, why has communication ended? We need somebody to talk to. Setback number 6. Mistrust and new administrations in both communities resulted in a stalemate. The good intentions in the agreement were subverted when the proposed management plan and foundation were both abandoned in '93, and the county did nothing, leaving the legal agreement unfinished and the land unprotected. So what stopped progress in implementing the agreement? In my opinion, there were fundamental flaws, terms that constitute injustice, that make the '89 agreement unworkable and needing correction. It required the Lummi to manage Madrona Point for preservation and set up a system for public access by permission, compatible with the goal of safeguarding the ancestors. But these expensive and complicated mandates were left unfunded. Imagine Madrona Point with an educational center that fulfills the vision beautifully stated by the Lummi in '87. Selwyn, their name for the place, will provide a setting where cultures can begin to learn from and better understand each other. History shows us that differences between cultures can often lead to misunderstanding, mistrust, and conflict. True understanding between Indian and non-Indian peoples means an appreciation of and respect for the differences that have so long divided us. For the Orcas and Lummi communities to again come together and create the proposed Selwyn Center would be a positive move towards cooperation to heal and protect land sacred to us all. Let's create a facility whose mission is to open our hearts, love our enemies, heal our hurts, to free our spirits. Yeah, why not? So the impact of this moral, ecological, and political failure, harm to the land and our ancestors. Neglect is abuse. Camping, fires, chainsaws. Let's take a little tour. Until we insist that our leaders take responsibility for following through with the need for management, the situation at Madrona Point remains dire. The sad truth, anybody can go there anytime and do anything. In recent years, homelessness on Orcas has grown. Madrona Point has been a location for car campers. The pledge. This is what we can ask for from our county council members, that they follow through on Section 18 of their agreement with the Lummi. The agreement itself was the product of discussions between lawyers. And then in this rather unfriendly document, you'll find this Section 18 buried towards the end, where the parties hereto pledge their mutual, cooperative, and good faith efforts to implement and effectuate the provisions of this agreement, and each party agrees not to take or cause to be taken any actions contrary to the provisions of this agreement. Sounds good, doesn't it? For over 30 years, the Lummi-Orcas relationship has grown warm and cold. Here are some highlights from this era of slowly increasing contact and cooperation. There was a marvelous 10-year anniversary celebration. In 2002, were very successful war canoe races. So we could say success number 8. The 10-year anniversary was wonderful. Events at the school and on the point were well attended. War canoe races in East Sound in 2002 were held in August, along with cultural events and an art show. All of these were well attended and deeply appreciated. Here's some photographs from the canoe races. It was too expensive to bring these huge canoes by ferry, so it hasn't happened again. We need to get a barge so we can bring the canoes over more easily. Setback number 7. On June 8, 2005, the first meeting in 16 years between a San Juan County Commissioner and Lummi representatives was held at the Lummi offices on the reservation. While there was talk about moving forward to improve relations, the basic problem was that there was still no money or mechanism set up for implementing the agreement. The stalemate continues. But despite the ongoing political and legal conflict between the county and the tribe, cultural and educational connections continued. A successful Lummi festival, Catching the Dreams of Our Ancestors, occurred in East Sound in 2005. In 2006, a delegation of Lummi leaders came to the museum to honor the discovery of an ancient bison skull, a significant archaeological discovery, for which we have a new exhibit at the museum. So here's the article about the Catching the Dreams of Our Ancestors show and the visit to the museum. Setback number 8. In 2007, a decision was made by the Lummi to put up a sign closing Madrona Point. This had been proposed repeatedly since the late 90s, when the level of harm to the land due to the lack of management became obvious. In a scenario reminiscent of 1993, San Juan County's elected leaders again avoided following through on their responsibilities as laid out in the agreement to ensure the proper care of the property. On the left is the first sign that went up, and on the right is the sign that we have now. And the article in the Sounder about the closure and why. As chair of the East Sound Planning Review Committee in 2008, we reached out to the Lummi Cultural Committee. Orcas Island volunteers await your request of money and manpower to benefit the health and well-being of the point. James Hilaire responded by saying our offer would be put before the committee. Setback number 9. Repeated efforts in 2008 to communicate with and ask for cooperation from the Lummi were not responded to. This is in ironic contrast to how in 1988 it was the county that refused to respond to a tribal request for cooperation, at that time for preservation. Success number 10. After another period of time without much contact went by. In 2014, several encouraging events took place. The first was a Lummi art show at Orcas Center. The second was an extraordinary invitation from the Lummi Cultural Committee to a dozen or so islanders to meet with them for a conversation. The third was a unique bit of serendipity. I ran into Bill James in East Sound on a Saturday morning, and he invited me to come along with the Lummi delegation headed to Mount Constitution, which is a vital part of their origin story. The Lummi Art Show, the meeting with the Lummi where I met Dean Washington, the fellow who built our canoe that the museum has, and he spoke to how we need to heal ourselves and our kids. We are suffering. We need to come into harmony with you and learn to be friends, to quit the fight and the struggle. We want to teach you who we are, and we want to learn who you are. About half of the people were Lummi from the Culture Committee, another half from the islands. And here's the visit to Mount Constitution in 2014. Bill James, their spiritual chief, who's since passed. Lawrence Solomon, both in the tower and sitting and watching an eagle thermal up into the sky. He was a chair of the tribe a few years later, tribal chair. A photograph of Jay Julius at the Oddfellows in 2016, the No Coalition meeting. We were fighting a coal terminal at Cherry Point, successfully. And Dean Washington, a Lummi culture leader, who we invited to come speak to us in 2018 because we share a desire to build a relationship between our communities that is mutually beneficial. So Dean had a vision to bring the past alive. It was his great-great-grandfather who was part of the Longhouse on Madrona Point. And so it's significant to meet Dean, a person with personal family connection to the point. 2018, we invited Sharon Kinley, who's director of the Coast Salish Institute at Northwest Indian College, to come to the island, and we gave a movie and raised funds for a cause of theirs. Chapter 13. Orcas Island Historical Museum is pleased to announce that we plan to bring more Indigenous cultural events to our schools and to our community. We're creating a Kids in Canoes program. The museum hopes to collaborate with our schools to bring the Lummi since time immemorial curriculum to Orcas for the first time, as required by law, but unfunded by the state. What is it with these unfunded things we do? So here's a 2019 mini canoe journey, intertribal, using the museum's canoe, and some pictures from the recent canoe events over the last few years. This is over by Camp Kyla. And just last year were 3 marvelous events. The Children of the Setting Suns came here to Orcas Center, sponsored a community gathering with an art show, salmon feast, and a movie screening. Perfectly cooked salmon. Lummi artist Jason LeClaire presented a mural to the Funhouse with traditional storytelling and drumming in the summer of 2024. The Lummi Black Hawk Dancers at Fall Fest in Deer Harbor, sponsored by Family Tides Farm in September of 2024. Complete with a pumpkin patch. And Jay Julius, who couldn't be here today, he's involved in a nonprofit called Cecile, and they have a forthcoming book, which I've contributed to, In the Spirit of Right and Respectful Relations. Chapter 14, The Way Ahead. How the principles of restorative justice give us a way to create a path with heart to promote healing between our communities. Folks, this is a call to action to restore justice. We acknowledge The 1989 legal agreement between the county and the Lummi is unjust and must be made fair. We apologize. We were wrong to impose mandates for our benefit, such as access, without paying for them. To make amends, we need to accept our community's responsibility to correct the agreement's fatal flaws and find an ongoing way to pay for Madrona Point's care. Solution: let's renew our support for the Lummi's vision of a Selwesen Center. By getting to know each other better, enduring progress becomes possible. And a parting thought after this shot. The old iPhones, terrible cameras, but beautiful flare around the sun, huh? So here's an excerpt from the Life magazine article. And from the woods, a Lummi named Bill James watched the sun spangle off pure blue water that massaged the rocky shore. A white man approached. It's great to know that I will always be able to come here, he said. Thank you. Don't thank me, the Lummi replied. It's not our land. It's everybody's land. So I'll leave you with this thought. Why do we need an education center on Madrona Point? This is a quote from Senegalese conservationist named Baba Dioum. He said, in the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. Thank you for coming today. I'd like to introduce you to John Vici, who has an announcement for us.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to the Orcas Center, thank you to the Historical Museum, and Peter. It's so amazing and profound just to experience your art and the photos over the years, but also the work and care that you've taken to keep it and document it and put this together to continue the work. And so much wouldn't happen because of you, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, John.
I found that picture of the Madrona with the healed branch really profound because, you know, a tree doesn't want to lose its branches, and yet to see what the act of healing and restoring can do really moved me. And when I think about your call to action and the perspective that you put in around Madrona Point, building the relationship with the Lummi, helping do our part in the relationship as a community with Selwesen, it really hits me that in this time right now, there's so much violence and stress that we're all experiencing. To reflect of what beauty can come from that healing is so profound, and this idea that we in our community can take action for that. It's both an incredible gift, a responsibility, and it really moves me. So I have an announcement. I'm not just talking. And one, Jay Julius from Lummi, he apologizes for not being able to be here. He wanted to be, but unfortunately his uncle passed away, and so he's at the funeral. But he really appreciates everyone coming. He appreciates the work that you've done over the years, Peter. So on Monday, June 16th, there will be an event at the Orcas Center. And many representatives and tribal leaders from Haida up in Alaska and Canada will be coming down to meet with tribal and spiritual leaders with Lummi, and they will be doing peace ceremonies. So if you don't know the history of between the Haida and the Haida would often come down and there'd be a bit of war that happened between them. And so if you're familiar with the waters of West Sound, you've got Haida Point, Massacre Bay, Victim Island, Skull Island, Indian Point. All of these names are referencing a slaughter that the Haida did of the Lummi. Over 150 Lummi were killed after the treaty was signed, before it was ratified. Right? And so the Lummi have invited the Haida to come down to create peace, to share song, gifts, a meal. And so at 7 p.m., everyone here and everyone on the island is invited back here to the Orcas Center to hear about some of the history, bear witness to that celebration of peace, and to reflect upon what we can do as a community to further the work of the peace between ourselves and the Lummi. So that will be Monday, June 16th. I almost said October. I'm already done with the sun. Monday, June 16th at 7 p.m. here. The announcement will go out this weekend on the Orcas Center website, as well as Orcas Hub and any other place we can get it to. But I really invite everyone. It's going to be a really special event with some special speakers. So, and I'm sorry that I'm not Jay Julius. He's much better than me. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay, you know where to find us. Yes?
What is the current situation now in terms of being able to be invited or ask permission to go to?
Thank you. That's the number one question. We can see that we have the legal right to go there, and we have the moral responsibility not to. So I don't go out there for entertainment purposes. I do go out there to damage the trash, the fires, and the trees that are cut down. Over 40 years of documentation of the damage to the point. So I would encourage all of us to follow this call to action and request that we use the tools of restorative justice to bring us together again and finish the beautiful vision for Madrona Point so that we can go out there and feel good about it. It is because it was a resort for decades that hundreds or thousands of people from around the region had been to Madrona Point. And the community was always invited to go there all through my life until 2007. I felt welcome going there, although the pain started in the 1990s, as you could see. So we have a moral obligation to move ahead and take care of one of our most special pieces of land in the islands.
Are all the Lummi unanimous in wanting the educational center? Because it does have environmental impact and it does affect the cultural meaning there and the aesthetics. It could, for instance, go somewhere else.
That's a good point. Yep, that's been open to discussion and would need to be thoroughly looked at. Of course, the point was heavily used with the inn and the cabins, and the thought was if there was a structure on the point, it would be probably located where the inn or other things were. But that is it's up for discussion how that would be done.
I had a similar question. Adding on to that, I believe they acquired a parcel that's north of the existing preservation areas. That they're planning to build something there.
I'm sorry?
The tribe has acquired a parcel that's north of the existing preservation area, so maybe that's
thank you.
With something in an area that's already developed.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. There is 2.1 acres right next to Madrona Point. As you go out with the Oddfellows on the left, there's that white house called the Hill House and the couple-acre parcel there. And it has been purchased, and Lummi, you're talking about possible uses. It is attractive because it's not on the point. And what could be done on the point is restricted to simply one facility with the caretaker's cabin. Whereas that 2-acre parcel is just part of urban zoning in East Sound and could have any kind of facility. It could have a restaurant or a gift shop or a longhouse or whatever. So it's still in the early discussion stages, and we don't know what direction that will go in. But it does open marvelous new possibilities.
What's the situation with the mandate by the county and our local commissioners? What is the relationship there with going forward to the management portion?
How do we get people to follow through on their agreements? People power, folks. This event is a bit of the beginning of the education process. If we can get this story into the community, into the schools. I forgot to answer your part of the question about the Lummi vision. The Lummi vision was lost. They don't tend to live a long time. The elders that I worked with are all dead. Bill, James, they're all gone. And so over the last 15 years have been reseeding the vision back to them, specifically to the Coast Salish Institute, which is the part of Northwest Indian College that teaches culture. And Sharon Kinley, who you saw that came, has become an ally in this desire for cultural education. And I've seen many of the Lummi now embracing the original vision. After all, their vision really fits very compatibly with the Northwest Indian College strategic plan, which calls for place-based learning and reconnection to place and other values that would be embodied by an educational facility. So that's a marvelous possibility how the vision fits in very well with their educational aspirations.
Can you clarify for us which of our current county commissioners are interested in this project and which ones might need a little help?
Thank you for asking. I don't know if they'll have me, but I'd like to take this roadshow over to the council chambers and remind them that they have a legal agreement that they could follow through on and that we'd like to help them. Lots of us would like to help them. Then we'll find out where they stand.
You mentioned there was evidence, or there has been evidence about cemeteries on Madrona Point. What is the status? Do we know there was, or there wasn't?
So Lynn Roberts, fortunately, did the research and found the records of the people buried there, the white people. The controversy was where are the gravestones? Roger Purdue's, the gas station guy, lived on Orcas for 88 years, was the unofficial mayor of East Sound, and a curmudgeon. But he had a near-death experience, and when he came back, he could divine. Water, usually. Remarkable thing, went to a beautiful green place, came back. I said, Roger, would you walk with me out on Madrona Point and see if we could find where those gravestones are? Sure. So there were paths that are now gone, but we found a location by where the water towers were. He says, they're right down there. I said, you know what, I think we'll leave them there. And in terms of the Lummi burials, the story I've been told is that it was the upper caste buried there and that there were probably no in-ground burials. They were in canoes with their belongings up in the fir boughs. When the canoes rotted, things would fall to the ground. They'd built little houses over them. But when the settlers came, they needed cook pots, transportation, and other basic goods. And so historically, we believe that every single bit of evidence that would have remained on the ground was removed.
So, Peter, when you talk to the council, can you let us all know so we can come with you?
Love to. There is a sign up outside, and if you would like to put your email or phone number down for emails or texts, that's just what we're going to do, is start rallying people who are willing to say, yes, we support the preservation of Madrona Point and finishing the good work that we began 35 to 40 years ago. I'll take one more.
I'm extremely interested in helping with the educational part of it because it is law that these children should be being taught by Indigenous people their history. So do you have information about who we need to talk to in the educational system and get that?
Yes, please, at the desk outside, you can sign up for information about the Kids at Canoes program. And the good news about that is that last December, we got the council to pass a funding source for our nonprofits called Cultural Access Programming. It will raise $800,000 a year for nonprofits and schools within San Juan County. And at the museum, we hope to be an applicant, and we hope to apply for funds to help get the Since Time Immemorial in the schools. That's ongoing funding, is what's nice about it, and also apply to bring Indigenous events to the community like this one. Another one? Any more? One more before we go? Time to go get a sunburn. Thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful day. Appreciate it.